Welcome back to Hannity. Joining us now to weigh in on Speaker Boehner's resignation and the ever-changing 2016 Republican field, former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. Mr. Speaker, good to see you.
Good to be with you.
60% of Republicans feel betrayed by the Republican Party in Washington. I'm one of them. Are we justified?
I think people are very justified to be frustrated that there's not more aggressive fighting, that there's not a more effective opposition to Obama, and that there's not more effective use of the investigative tool of all the committees to lay out a record of just how bad this administration is. So yeah, I think there's a lot of justified frustration, and I think that it makes life more difficult.
Listen, you laid out a vision for the country. You shut down the government, but you also got us the end of welfare as we know it, the era of big government being over, and a balanced budget. And I know you paid a personal price for it. I don't see John Boehner's vision. I don't see that they're willing to fight and use their constitutional authority on immigration, on Planned Parenthood, on defunding Obamacare. The whole 2014 election was about stopping executive amnesty. They ended up funding it. I don't think there's any excuse for this behavior myself.
Look, I think part of it's a very deep disagreement about how history unfolds. Ronald Reagan went through a period where he was quite unpopular. Margaret Thatcher went through a period where she was quite unpopular. We closed the government twice when I was Speaker, and initially people were very upset. But in each of those three cases, we achieved policy breakthroughs that were historic. As you point out, in our case, we got welfare reform, we got balanced budgets, the only time in your lifetime. I mean, a lot of things happened that were very good. If you're not prepared to stand firm under our constitutional system, you basically make the president an emperor. The president gets to do whatever he wants to because he'll threaten to veto and close government. And then the news media will run over and beat up the Republicans.
So let me be clear.
That's the price of government.
Every time Speaker Boehner and Mitch McConnell say, I'm not shutting down the government, didn't they ostensibly pretty much surrender to President Pushover, by the way, the worst negotiator that we've ever seen as evidenced by this Iranian deal? They surrendered.
Well, no, look, he's only a pushover in foreign policy. In domestic policy, he's gotten an amazing amount of what he wants because he's a bully and he's willing to run over people and he's willing to abuse the Constitution and he's willing to plain lie as he did about keeping your doctor.
They are allowing that to happen.
Right.
All right, let me move on to the 2016 field. When you put the numbers of Donald Trump, Carly Fiorina, Ben Carson, and Ted Cruz together, four insurgent candidates, you've got nearly 60% of the Republican vote in a field of 16. What does that tell you?
Well, it tells me to look at the American people more than the candidates. The American people, Gallup reported that 75% of the American people believe there is widespread corruption in government. The average American believes the federal government wastes 51 cents out of every dollar. 45% of the American people are afraid of the federal government. I mean, these are numbers that tell you that the country wants very bold, very dramatic change. In a sense, Scott Walker, although he didn't execute it very well, Scott had the right slogan in Go Bold, Go Big, because I think the country wants leaders who are prepared to stand up and say, we're going to break the nonsense in Washington, we're going to break the bureaucracy, and we're going to get back to a common sense America.
But doesn't Donald Trump have a good slogan, too? People are tired of 50 million Americans in food stamps and 94 million Americans out of the labor force and 46 million on food stamps. And he says, let's make America great again. Do you see Donald Trump? Do you see a path for him? Do you think he can win this thing? Go all the way?
Sure. And part of my recommendation to Trump would be to pick up on Scott Walker's slogan of Go Bold, Go Big, and come back with, and he took a step with his tax plan. It's a step. But I would come back with a series of very bold programs. Trump's got to get in. He's now proven he can be the front runner. Now he's got to consolidate and prove he can be a leader on policy ideas, not just on attacking his fellow candidates.
I liked his plan yesterday. Did you like it? I thought it was
a very good step in the right direction. And let me offer you a suggestion that's very important that I'll be writing about. Quit trying to pay for tax cuts with tax policy. Pay for tax cuts by cutting spending. and say to people, would you rather have the money thrown away by a federal bureaucrat, or would you rather have that money in your pocketbook?
All right.
That's a much better way to pitch how we shrink government so we fatten your wallet.
What about Ted Cruz? What about Marco Rubio? What about Carly Fiorina, Ben Carson? Where do you see them ending up?
Look,
Or if none of us have a crystal ball, but you've been around this a long time.
Look, I love Bill Kristol the other day wrote this great piece and said, none of us last Sunday would have predicted Scott Walker dropping out, and none of us would have predicted John Boehner retiring. So when we tell you this Sunday our predictions, just remember that.
Yeah.
So let's start there. Any of the people you mentioned, I would throw in Kasich. I would say any of the people we're talking about here. Kasich, certainly Kasich, Rubio, Cruz, Fiorina, Carson, and
Jeb.
Obviously Trump. Those six are all, in my mind, positioned to be the nominee and have a real shot at it. Huckabee has a longer shot, I think. Rand Paul has an even longer shot. And Christie, I think, has a longer shot. But in a world that's this topsy-turvy, and remember, we have no idea how foreign policy is going to affect this. You have the Chinese being very aggressive in the South China Sea, as well as with cyber attacks. You have Putin projecting Russian power into Syria in a way we have never seen since the middle of the Cold War.
And we talked about, I'm running out of time, though. I got to ask you one last question. Does Hillary survive? Does she get the nomination? No way.
No.
I agree with you. Joe Biden gets it, right?
Probably, well, somebody. But not her.
You mean the guy that says you have to have a slight Indian accent to work in a Dunkin' Donuts or a 7-Eleven? The same guy that said, oh, Obama's clean and articulate, that guy?
No, I think you could get your first socialist, openly socialist nominee.
Oh, my gosh. God forbid. Well, you know what? If the 73-year-old curmudgeon wins...
You've already had a covertly socialist nominee.
Yeah, that's
Why not
true.
go for an open socialist nominee?
All right, Newt Gingrich, always good to see you. Thank you.
Good to see you.
And coming up, Congressman Kevin McCarthy, he wants to replace John Boehner as Speaker of the House, but how would his leadership be different? He's here to join us next.